Floodwaters tore through my home. A man saved me from a crocodile's jaws. We ran toward a burning gas leak. Then I heard my daughter scream. I woke to my bed shaking violently, as if the world itself was unraveling. My heart raced, pounding in my chest. The air was thick with the sound of creaking wood and shattering glass. I lived in Crescent Bay, a small coastal town in Oregon, where mornings were usually quiet, filled with the hum of waves. Not today. The ground lurched beneath me, an earthquake tearing through the calm. I stumbled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold floor. Then I heard it. A window in the living room exploded into shards. I ran toward the noise, my pulse hammering in my ears. Water was rushing in, fast and furious, flooding the house. Dark, murky waves poured through the broken window, swallowing the furniture. I froze for a second, my mind blank with panic. I knew Crescent Bay's protocols for earthquakes and tsunamis, but nothing prepares you for the real thing. The water was already at my knees, icy and relentless. I waded toward the door, my nightgown clinging to my skin. A sharp pain sliced through my cheek. I touched my face and my fingers came away slick with blood. A shard of glass had lodged itself in my skin. I gritted my teeth, yanking it out. The sting was brutal, but I couldn't stop. The water was rising, now at my thighs, pulling at me like a living thing. I fought my way to the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the lock. It wouldn't budge. My chest tightened, fear choking me. I pounded on the wood, desperate, until it finally gave way. I stumbled outside, the cold air hitting me like a slap. The street was a river, debris swirling in the current, broken branches, pieces of furniture, someone's bicycle. My home, my sanctuary, was drowning behind me. I stood there, blood dripping from my cheek, my heart screaming for my husband, Mark, and our kids, Liam and Ava. They'd been at a friend's house up the hill when the quake hit. Were they safe? The thought clawed at me, but I couldn't think about it now. I had to move, had to survive. I took a shaky breath, the salty tang of the floodwater stinging my nose. My cheek throbbed, my body ached, but I forced myself forward. The world felt like it was collapsing, and I was caught in the middle. All I could do was keep going, one step at a time, toward higher ground, toward hope. The water surged around me, a cold, relentless force pulling at my legs. Crescent Bay was unrecognizable, its quiet streets now a churning river of debris. I waded forward, my heart pounding, my cheek still stinging from the glass shard I'd yanked out. The flood was up to my waist now, and every step felt like fighting a current determined to drag me under. I had to reach higher ground, had to find safety. My mind flickered to Mark, Liam, and Ava. Were they safe on the hill? I shoved the thought down. Focus, Emily. Survive. I started swimming, my arms cutting through the murky water. Broken branches and shattered furniture floated past, scraping my skin. My muscles burned, but I pushed on, driven by raw instinct. Then, a sharp pain slammed into my chest. A jagged tree branch, carried by a rogue wave, struck me hard. I gasped. The air knocked out of me and fell backward. Water closed over my head, flooding my mouth and nose. Panic clawed at my chest as I flailed, my lungs screaming. My fingers grazed a piece of debris and I grabbed it, pulling myself up. I broke the surface, coughing, gasping, my chest throbbing where the branch had hit. The water was deeper now, almost to my shoulders. I swam harder, my eyes scanning for anything stable, a rooftop, a hill. Something caught my eye in the distance, a dark shape moving through the flood. At first, I thought it was just a log, maybe a piece of wreckage. Then it turned. Two cold yellow eyes locked onto me. My blood froze. A crocodile. A goddamn crocodile was swimming down what used to be Main Street. My stomach churned, terror gripping me like a vice. Crescent Bay wasn't supposed to have crocodiles, but the tsunami must have swept it in from some zoo or wildlife park nearby. I didn't think, I just swam. My arms screamed, my legs kicked frantically, but the crocodile was closing in. Its sleek, monstrous form cut through the water, faster than I could ever hope to be. My lungs burned, my vision blurred with panic. I was sure this was it, torn apart in the middle of my own town. The water churned behind me, the beast's jaws so close I could feel the ripples. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. Then, out of nowhere, a shout. Grab the rope! A man's voice, rough and urgent. I turned my head and saw a small boat slicing through the flood. A guy, maybe in his 40s, leaned over the side, throwing a rope toward me. His face was pale, his eyes wide with the same fear I felt. I lunged for the rope, my fingers slipping on the wet cord. I gripped it tight, my arms shaking as he pulled me toward the boat. The crocodile's snout brushed my leg, and I screamed, kicking wildly. With one final heave, the man yanked me aboard. I collapsed onto the deck, gasping, my body trembling from head to toe. The boat rocked gently, the sound of water lapping against it, mixing with my ragged breaths. The man James, he later told me, looked at me, his hand still gripping the rope. You okay? He asked, his voice shaky but kind. I nodded, barely able to speak, my throat raw. Blood from my cheek dripped onto the deck, mixing with the water pooling around me. I was alive, barely. James steered the boat through the flooded streets, his eyes scanning the chaos. We're not done yet, he said, his voice tight. There are more people out there. I looked at him, at the determination in his face despite the fear. My body ached, my mind was a mess, but I knew he was right. I couldn't stop now, not when others were still out there, fighting to survive just like I had. I sat on the boat, my breath still ragged, my cheek throbbing where the glass had cut me. The water around us was a chaotic swirl of debris, splintered wood, car tires, a child's toy floating past like a ghost. Crescent Bay was a war zone, and I was shaking, my body heavy with exhaustion and fear. James gripped the boat's steering wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes scanning the flooded streets. He hadn't said much since pulling me aboard, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his gaze darted to his phone every few seconds. I wiped the blood from my face, trying to steady myself. You okay? I asked, my voice hoarse. He glanced at me, his expression tight. My wife, Sarah. She's out there somewhere, missing since the flood hit. His voice cracked and my heart sank. I could feel his pain, sharp and raw like a wound that wouldn't close. I thought of Mark, Liam, and Ava, safe I hoped up the hill. The fear of losing them gnawed at me, but James was living that nightmare right now. We'll find her, I said, the words feeling hollow but necessary. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the water, searching. We pushed through the flood, the boat weaving between submerged cars and broken rooftops. James called out to survivors, his voice steady despite the panic I knew he felt. We spotted a woman clinging to a lamppost, her face pale, her arms trembling. I leaned over the side, extending my hand. "Grab on!" I shouted. She reached for me, her fingers cold and slippery. James helped me pull her aboard, her body shivering as she collapsed against the deck. "Thank you," she whispered, tears mixing with the water on her face. I wrapped a spare jacket around her, my own hands shaking. We kept going, pulling people from rooftops, fishing them out of half-submerged cars. Every rescue was a battle against the water, the debris, the fear that we were too late. James worked like a man possessed, but his phone never left his hand. He checked it obsessively, hoping for a signal, a text, anything from Sarah. I wanted to say something, to ease his worry, but words felt useless. Instead, I focused on the task, hauling ropes, steadying the boat, bandaging a man's bleeding arm with a torn piece of cloth. My body ached, my chest still sore from the tree branch, but stopping wasn't an option. Hours passed, the sky darkening with storm clouds. We rescued a young couple stranded on a balcony, their faces etched with shock. As we helped them aboard, I noticed James staring at the woman's red jacket, his eyes wide with hope. "Sarah?" he called, his voice breaking. The woman turned, confused, and I saw his face fall. It wasn't her. The jacket, the brown curly hair, even the gold necklace, it matched Sarah's description perfectly, but her face was wrong. James apologized, his voice barely audible, and turned back to the wheel. My heart broke for him. I touched his shoulder, a small gesture, but he didn't look at me. He just kept going, his hope fraying, but not gone. We pressed on, shouting Sarah's name into the chaos. Every survivor we saved, we asked, "Have you seen a woman in a red jacket, brown curly hair, gold necklace?" Most shook their heads, their own fear drowning out our questions. But then, a man we pulled from a flooded shop paused, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, I think I saw someone like that, up on the old bank building, a few blocks east." James's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with desperate hope. "You sure?" he asked, his voice tight. The man nodded, uncertain but earnest. Red jacket, curly hair. She looked hurt. James didn't hesitate. He turned the boat, navigating through the debris with reckless speed. I clung to the side, my stomach twisting with both hope and dread. The bank building loomed ahead, half submerged, its roof crowded with survivors. As we got closer, I saw her, a woman in a red jacket, her brown curls matted with water, clutching a gold necklace. She was slumped against a chimney, her left leg bleeding heavily. "Sarah!" James shouted, his voice raw. She looked up, her face pale but alive. James scrambled onto the roof, nearly slipping in his haste. He reached her, falling to his knees, his hands trembling as he touched her face. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she clung to him. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I helped James lift her onto the boat, her leg wound deep and ugly. I tore a strip from my shirt, wrapping it tightly to slow the bleeding. She winced but managed a weak smile. "Thank you," she said to me. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. James held her hand, his face a mix of relief and lingering fear. We loaded the other survivors onto the boat, their grateful murmurs filling the air. But I could feel it, the danger wasn't over. Not yet. The boat rocked gently as we headed toward the shelter. Sarah slumped against James, her face pale from pain. My hands were raw, my cheeks still bled sluggishly, but my mind was on Mark, Liam, and Ava. Were they still safe at the shelter up the hill? The thought gnawed at me, a cold knot in my chest. Crescent Bay was a nightmare, flooded streets, shattered homes, and now, a new terror. A deafening explosion shook the air, the sound rolling through the town like thunder. I gripped the boat's edge, my heart sinking. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. James looked back, his eyes wide. "Fire!" he said, pointing to the horizon. Flames roared in the distance, devouring what was left of Main Street. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky, choking out the sun. The tsunami had stopped, but this was worse. The fire was alive, hungry, spreading fast. My stomach twisted as I thought of the shelter, of my family. Were they safe? I wanted to run to them, to hold them, but people were still out here, trapped. I couldn't abandon them. Not now. James steered the boat toward the flames, his jaw set. "We have to help," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Sarah grabbed his arm, her voice weak. "Be careful." He nodded, squeezing her hand, then looked at me. "You with me, Emily?" I swallowed hard, my body screaming to stop, to rest. But I thought of those still out there, of the terror they felt. "I'm in," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. We docked near a flooded street where the fire was closing in. The heat hit me like a wall, searing my skin even from a distance. We grabbed what we could from the boat blankets, a first aid kit, a crowbar, and waded into the chaos. The water was still knee-deep, but the fire didn't care. It leapt from building to building, wooden storefronts crackling like kindling. Screams echoed through the smoke, sharp and desperate. My heart pounded, my lungs burning with every breath of ash-filled air. We found a family trapped in a hardware store, the flames licking at the windows. James pried the door open with the crowbar, his hands steady despite the heat. I helped pull them out, a mother, her 2 kids, their faces streaked with soot. "Thank you," the mother sobbed, clutching her children. We guided them to higher ground, but there was no time to rest. Another building collapsed nearby, sending sparks into the air. The fire was relentless, and so were we. We joined a group of firefighters, their faces grim under layers of grime. They were battling a blaze at the old diner, hoses spraying arcs of water that that seemed to do nothing. "It's a gas leak," one of them shouted over the roar of the flames. "The earthquake must have cracked the main line. It's feeding the fire." My blood ran cold. A gas leak. That's what caused the explosion. If we didn't stop it, the whole town could burn. James and I followed the firefighters, helping where we could. We dragged debris out of their path, carried buckets of water, directed survivors away from the danger. My hands blistered, my throat raw from the smoke. Every step felt heavier, my body begging to give up, but I couldn't. Not when I saw a man stumble out of a burning shop, his arm charred. Not when I heard a child crying from a rooftop. We kept going, pulling people to safety, bandaging wounds, shouting warnings. My fear for my family was a constant ache, but I pushed it down. They were safe. They had to be. The fire was gaining ground, the heat so intense it felt like my skin was melting. A firefighter collapsed, overcome by smoke. I knelt beside him, pouring water over his face, urging him to breathe. James helped carry him to safety, his own face streaked with ash. "We're losing this," he muttered, his voice hoarse. I knew he was right. The flames were too big, too fast. My heart sank, despair creeping in. But then a firefighter, a burly guy with soot-stained gear, shouted, "We need to find the gas main. Shut it off and we stop the fire." It was a slim chance, but it was all we had. James and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement. We'd help. We had to. The firefighters led us through the chaos, dodging flames and collapsing beams. The air was thick, suffocating. Every breath a struggle. I thought of Liam's laugh, Ava's tiny hand in mine, Mark's steady voice. I couldn't lose them. Not after all this. We pushed forward, driven by desperation and defiance. The fire roared around us, but we weren't done fighting. Not yet. The air was thick with smoke, the heat pressing against my skin like a living thing. Crescent Bay was burning, and we were racing against time. The firefighters led James and me through the flooded, flame-lit streets, their faces grim with determination. My body ached, blisters on my hands, my chest bruised, my cheeks still oozing blood, but I couldn't stop. The gas main was our only hope to kill the fire. If we failed, the whole town, my family included, could be lost. I pushed the thought of Mark, Liam, and Ava away, focusing on each step through the ankle-deep water. The firefighters pointed to a flooded intersection, once the heart of Crescent Bay, now a wasteland of twisted metal and debris. "The gas main's down there," one said, his voice rough from smoke. "A valve's leaking, feeding the fire." My stomach churned. The water was murky, hiding God knows what beneath. A firefighter, a wiry guy named Dan, handed us a wrench. "We need to shut it off. It's underwater, but it's our shot." James nodded, his eyes fierce despite the exhaustion carved into his face. I gripped the wrench, my hands trembling. Dan dove into the water, disappearing into the dark. We waited, the hiss of gas loud in the air, the flames roaring closer. My heart pounded, each second stretching into eternity. I glanced at James, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. "He'll make it," I said, more to myself than to him. The water rippled, and Dan resurfaced, gasping. "It's stuck," he coughed. "Need help clearing debris." Without a word, James and I waded in, the cold water biting my skin. We hauled broken concrete and twisted pipes, my blisters screaming with every lift. The gas smell was dizzying, the flames so close I could feel their heat on my face. Dan dove again, wrench in hand. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant screams of survivors. I held my breath, praying. 1 minute, 2. My chest tightened too long. Then, a faint clank echoed from below. The hiss of gas slowed, then stopped. Dan broke the surface, gasping, his face pale but triumphant. "It's off," he panted. "We did it." Relief flooded me, my knees weak. The flames didn't vanish, but they stopped growing, their roar dulling slightly. James clapped Dan's shoulder, a tired grin breaking through the soot on his face. We climbed back to the boat, my body heavy, my mind reeling. The firefighters stayed to secure the area, but James and I knew our work wasn't done. Survivors still needed help, and my family was waiting. I could feel the weight of the day, flood, fire, fear crushing me, but we'd won this battle. The gas was off, the fire was contained. For now, Crescent Bay had a chance. I looked at James, his eyes still scanning for others to save. "Let's keep going," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in every muscle. We had to, for Sarah, for my family, for everyone. I stumbled into the shelter, my body screaming with exhaustion. My eyes scanned the crowded room, heart pounding. Then I saw them, Mark, Liam, and Ava, huddled in a corner, safe. Relief hit me like a wave. I ran to them, collapsing into their arms, tears streaming down my soot-streaked face. "You're okay," I whispered, holding them tight. Crescent Bay was in ruins, but we were alive. James and I became friends, working side by side to rebuild. Despite the loss, I found hope in our community's strength. We'd survived. Together, we'd heal.